For this video series, it was suggested to me that I take a look at some of my games where I attack without sacrificing material, or at least not sacrificing more than pawns. And at first I thought it was a bit strange, since attacking without giving up major material, that sounded to me like that's just what everybody wants. That's the dream, and it has nothing to do with being a very good player. But I guess it's sort of a skill to actually get to the positions where you have control and you can attack without giving up material. The first example I'm going to give is actually a fairly standard one, except for one move. This is a rapid game that I played as black against Topalov in Paris in 2016. So all pretty heavy D3 Spanish theory here. Not going to go through the details. But yeah, in general, white is a little bit better, but it's not that big a deal. Knight h4, I think, was a fairly interesting plan. Sort of forcing g6, getting the knight to f5. Otherwise, I'm probably intending to play c6 pretty soon while his rook is on a2, and then I should be fine. And after g3, the knight is coming to g2, e3 in case c6 comes. So I decided to change track a bit. And knight e8, knight g2, knight g7, starting to hint at f5, typical King's Indian, Old Indian, Czech Benoni, whatever you may call it, counterplay. I would say that I would love to have my pawn on b7 in these situations. b5 is a bit of a weakness that white can maybe exploit. So I definitely have to look for counterplay. Then he went bishop h6, which is quite normal. I went for knight f6, typical plan, sending knight g4, driving the bishop away. Here I think he should have done something like f3. If queen h3, then he goes away with the bishop, let's say, to e3, maybe even further to d2, moves his rook back, and yeah, again, I wouldn't be too worried. Maybe move the knight again, knight d7, then f5, but white is certainly not doing poorly. And he actually admitted after the game that knight e3 was simply because he had missed queen h3. And his bishop is forced off the board, and now I'm doing well. b4, very logical starting play over here, and h5. You could still probably have had a good position here had you done something like rook to b1 here, preparing a4. Because after he played a4, I had a typical trick. There is clearly no way that I can absorb the pressure that he has on the queen side, so I have to counterattack. And with his pieces being as uncoordinated as they are, a5 works pretty well. Again, very typical counterattacking motive. You see it in pawn endings all the time, where the counter breakthrough can be, or in all the rook endings like rook against bishop or rook against knight, that the counter breakthrough can be very, very effective. And here, at least the way he played, rook b1, ab, rook b4, ba4. I've managed to exchange of the queen sides, yeah, the advantages of my position remained, while he has no real counterplay anymore. It's not that his position is very bad, it's just that now it's gone from pleasant for him to pleasant for me. Play knight g4, again very typical, the trick. It should be noted that always wanna combine tactical tricks with positional play, and that's exactly what I do here. So clearly he doesn't want to take, since then I get hg4, and h2 is always going to be an issue, even though he has moves like queen f1, I go back, queen h6, and rook h8 is a big threat there. So he goes back, now we'll go h4, he makes a logical move, f3, moving away the knight, but here's the aforementioned tactical trick that I go hg, and hg he sort of has to play, because fg, then gh, and queen c3 happens, and I win material. So he has to take back, but now we get that theme again. I've opened the H file. I have no real weaknesses. Like, you can try to get it at c7, but in worst case I can always protect that pawn with bishop d8, and I have an open file to work on. So now we get that situation, like attacking with equal material, which again I think every chess player, every good chess player at least, loves. He went queen g2, quite logical, queen h6, queen h2, queen g5, queen d2, queen h5. None of this is completely forced, but I'm trying again to avoid the queen exchange at any cost, since then he could calmly start attacking c7 and my advantage would be gone. And here he played g4, which I'd foreseen in advance, and once I realized the strength of my reply, I have to say I got really, really excited. So the point here is, again, he wants to exchange queens at any cost, even weakening his dark squares as much as playing g4. And so the only way I figured out that I can avoid the queen exchange is playing queen h8. The problem for him, though, is that the dark squares are decisively weakened at this point. Knight h7 is coming, then either bishop g5 or knight g5. Queen will eventually enter the h-file again, or go the other way, and the attack just plays itself. And I have to say that the rest of the game was just a pleasure. He went knight b5, knight h7. You can check it out for yourself, but knight c7 doesn't really work. I go knight g5, and the attack just breaks through. He doesn't have time for this. So after knight h7, he went queen h2, rook b8, now trying to bring the queen over to d8 or c8, then the knight to g5, and also the bishop is coming to g5, possibly. He went c4, protecting the knight. If he takes the pawn like this, I can, for instance, go rook to a1, pinning that knight. Rook b7, queen, maybe not to c8. Queen d8 is a possibility. Yeah, in general, it should be winning. There are also other options like going rook a7 first, maybe then knight b5, then rook a1. Anyway, he has absolutely no defense here. He decided to try and hold for a little bit with c4, but now I go queen d8. Once again, my position it was just such a pleasure to play here. It just plays itself. Knight e3, now I bring the bishop. Queen e2, bishop f4, knight g2, bishop g3. Once again, exploiting the illness that he has on the dark squares. It's not only one square; it's spreading everywhere. Queen e3, knight g5, tries to run with the king. Now queen h8 with little tactic, queen g5 and queen h1 takes the knight and infiltrating decisively, and he resigned because there's nothing he can do. He cannot allow a rook to invade on the queen side, so he can never take on c7 or a8. And then queen h1 is also coming with decisive threats. So really, this game I feel like it was about one move, and that was queen h8. Once you realize that all of these optics of putting the queens in the corner, queen in the corner is might be wrong. Once you start to look a little bit deeper and realize that my pieces are going to hit the right squares, and even with all the time in the world, there's nothing he can do. Yeah, it was a beautiful feeling and a pleasure to play. The next two games I'm going to show are not only from the same tournament, they were actually played in consecutive rounds, and both with the white pieces. So the first one is against Carlsen. It's from the Bilbao Masters 2016. I'd lost the first round to Nakamura, a game where I was considerably better, but it was my first and only loss to him in Classical, so that was a bit of a blow. I'd come back to win with the black pieces against Bailly the other day, and then obviously against Carlsen, I was eager to to show who's the boss before the upcoming World Championship. So when e4, he went c5. He does play the knight off a bit, but yeah, it was clear that e5 was his prep for the World Championship, and he was trying to hide it. At least that's easier to say in hindsight. Knight f3, d6. Well, I was surprised by the knight off, and I decided just to play something that I hadn't really looked at, but then again, I thought he might not either. So here there are many moves. Knight c6, knight d7, bishop d7. Generally all pretty much fine for black. Everything except knight takes e4. That's not a good move. But he went g6, which is also a very good move. Castles, bishop g7, bishop b5. Here the point is that in case of bishop d7, you want to take. It looks like white has lost the tempo, but once you get these structures where white goes d4, black takes, and then d5, then bishop is misplaced on g7, and he's also weak in his king side, which makes the possible h-pawn advance a lot stronger. So there is some point to it. Black has also other ways to play, like knight fd7, d4 castles, then knight c6 later on, trying to play some Benoni-like structure, which is also not bad for black. I won a rapid game once against Freycinet, which I was pretty happy with with the black pieces in that line, which I think was my only experience with this line before this game. Karjakin went for knight c6, which is also an excellent move. d4, he didn't take, sorry. Queen b6, bishop a4, takes, castles. I'm not in time, simply to protect everything. If knight c3, he goes bishop g4. So I decided to go d5, which you really don't like doing with the black bishop on g7. He went knight b8, which is perfectly fine. Knight a5 is also good for black. In general, he doesn't have opening problems here at all. Knight b8, knight c3, bishop g4. Always a good idea, getting rid of that bishop, which doesn't really have a lot of work to do. You might think that it makes sense to play bishop d7 first, and then let's say after bishop b3 or bishop c2, then to go bishop g4 to force the white bishop to a more passive square. But I think in reality the bishop is not so well placed on a4 and will have to retreat later anyway, so I think it's rather black who will lose time then. Bishop g4, h3, takes, knight b d7, and I remember not being particularly happy here. Didn't really see what I was going to aim for. It looks very harmonious for black. No weaknesses, easy play on the c file, and bishop on g7 doing well. So I decided eventually that I should really play for an attack here on the king side. I felt like that was my only chance of getting any real play here. Okay, knight e5, all quite logical. Knight fd7, bringing the knight to c4. So I play bishop g5. Once again, I think it's just useful to ask him some questions at least. I'm not really threatening to take on e7 because f6 could then happen. Yeah, at least I'm bringing out the bishop. Maybe I'm preparing king h1, f4. Who knows? I have to do something. There are several moves here for him. Bishop f6 is fine, but I understand that he didn't want to trade that bishop. Played this, which is also fine. g5. Knight g6 is kind of the obvious choice here. And then I wasn't so sure what to do. Thought maybe I should try and get knight d1 to e3. But he has ways to meet it, like he could go knight f4 if I takes back. I don't think that's too great for me. He also could go bishop d4, and then I don't think I should take, because he goes bishop e3, f e3, and then puts a knight on e5. So maybe I would go king h1 anyway, but for for one thing, I don't think f4 is particularly dangerous for him. He also has counterplay, so I think he's doing quite well there. Anyway, he went queen a6, which I felt was a bit hesitant, but quite reasonable as well. I don't want to exchange. If I do exchange, he has all the play on the queen side, and bishop is out of play on g3. Probably have to trade that bishop. In short, black is just better, so I went queen d1. I really thought he was going to go knight c4 here, and I was calculating lines after bishop d3, knight c5, maybe bishop e2, takes, knight e4. I wasn't so sure, queen d4 or something. I really remember that I was not at all convinced about White's play here. I mean, I thought I'm getting some counterplay at least, so it wasn't a complete disaster, but I was not at all happy with the way things were going. But he went rook c4, which is really a bad move, since that square belongs to the knight. And I think it was a case of trying to keep control of the position. f4 is a little trick. Then he has rook d4. I have no good square for the queen, for instance, queen e1. I think he can go knight d3, and he's doing very well. But I simply go king h1, preparing f4. He cannot do knight g6 anymore, because then bishop d3 comes. So he's really set him up for the upcoming f4 advance. And though he gets to double the rooks, now my play is actually coming pretty fast, so he's clearly misplayed it now. Queen b6, and now queen h5. Knight f6, queen f5. Taking the opportunity to put the queen on a good square. He went queen d8, threatening queen d7 with a queen swap when he would be absolutely fine. I take, and I went rook t1. The rook had done its job on b1, and I'm trying to get it into to play on d3 to d3. My mindset was really all attack here. Sorry, I missed the move. I'd played rook, bishop b3, and then rook d4 before I took on e5. So, yeah, this is the position. Queen d7. So, my earlier point about swinging the rook was obviously nonsense. It was more about challenging the very strong rook on d4. Okay. Queen f3. Now I'm probably threatening to take, and then knight e2, threatening both the pawn and e5. So he has to do something about the rook, and he went rook b4. Just very logical. He's now intending a4, a plan that is not that easy to stop, except that I can go rook to d2, which I think is very important. Now after a5, I can retreat the bishop, put the rook on f2 maybe later, and a4 can be met by a3, not opening any lines. And after rook f8, now preparing knight e8 to d6, I'm finally getting my attack going. It looks like he's very solid here, but in reality it's very difficult to defend already. Like I have the plan of going rook g2, then either h4 or g5 immediately, and it's pretty hard to stop. Anyway, he went a5. Now he's just not in time. I go rook g2, if a4 I go bishop d1, and a3 doesn't really do much. I just take it, and then I push. And he's not in time to attack the knight on c3. So he decided to switch to defense, but he cannot really hold. Rook b6, g5. Yeah, in case of rook g6, I think I could just protect. If he takes, I take. Queen h5 is gonna come, and he's gonna have huge problems on the h file. We also have plans like knight d1 to e3, and so on. And it's just become a horrible position for him, in the sense that I have an easy attack, and I haven't even sacrificed a pawn. He went king h8. Sorry, that rook is on f1. Rook g1. f5, trying to muddy the waters. As I can recall, I was a bit short of time, but he was much shorter. I think we played, time control was something like 1.5 hours for 40 moves, and then half an hour or an hour for the rest. It was pretty shortened, at least. Queen h3, you run rook b4 back. And now I took. The funny thing is, here I froze. And I thought for a long time, like I thought I'd messed up the game, to be honest, because the plan was always queen g6, knight to g4, take it, and wins. And then I saw rook b6, and I'm thinking to myself, d6, rook d6, wow, is there no mate here? Have I really messed it up? And then I realized that he has actually played a5, so I can just take the rook. But that took me embarrassingly long to realize. Anyway, once I'd seen that, I went queen g6 pretty quickly. He went knight g4, rook g4. He resigned. So the very next game, I played Wesley So with the white pieces, and it turned out this time there were no more Sicilian surprises to be found, and he played the Berlin, which I sort of expected, but I didn't really know what to do against, because in reality very few people do. D3, so I went d3, bishop c5, and then just on my way to the game, walking around, I don't know if it was sunny, but let's just for the video say that it was sunny Bilbao, I thought of why not take and then play Queen E2. And so that's what I did. He went Queen E7, Knight D2. I thought at least I'm getting a slightly fresh position. Bishop G4 is perfectly natural. H3, Bishop H5. Here I thought for a long time, and I tried to come up with something new. Thing is, the standard plan would be either Knight F1 or G4. The problem with Knight F1 is that whenever I go Knight G3, force him to take on F3, then I simply lost the tempo by playing Queen E2. And I did this myself against Vichy as black in the 2013 World Championship match. I played Bishop G4, he went H3, Bishop H5, yeah, G4, Bishop G7, Bishop G6, Knight E5 obviously doesn't work due to Queen D4. Well, he went Knight F1, and then Knight G3 next, and I took on F3. And so, as you can see, in the game, I would have simply had a tempo less since I've already played Queen E2. And even in that game, to be honest, it didn't really get much at all. I made a draw pretty easily. So in our game, I decided that I should come up with something new. And as you can see, black is ready to castle at this point, and the fact that he didn't castle in the game is a bit of a travesty. There's no other way to put it, but sometimes that's the way things happen, that you go for some strategic goals and you have to weigh them against factors, typical time factors like development, and sometimes you don't get it right. So A3 has some meanings. First of all, I think if he goes A5, then at least one thing that I've gained is that he cannot really castle queenside after that, because his queenside is going to be blown open with B4. And as you can see in this position, it's pretty unclear where he's going to castle. Castling kingside is perhaps not so attractive, as he's allowing G4 and then Knight F1, G3 with, I think, pretty standard easy attack. And so A3 was in a way trying to discourage him from castling the other side, and trying to ask him some questions in the opening. So he went Knight D7, B4, continuing the plan, and he went Bishop D6. Bishop D4 is also normal. I think I had something very similar in the Blitz game against Aronian a couple of years ago. Rook B1, you'd probably go Bishop C3, not allowed to be exchanged by G4, which would be desirable strategically for me. And if castles, he can take it, maybe take on F3 as well. But it could be argued that white is a little bit better. Maybe this space that I've gained could have some meaning. Anyway, he went Bishop D6, which is of course also perfectly sensible. Knight C4, F6, Knight E3. Now this is one of the points of going A3, B4, is that e3 is available. Otherwise, he would just chop that knight off, I think, and he would be absolutely fine. But now, asking me some questions again, knight is coming to f5. So as far as I can remember, I was pretty happy with my position. He went a5, and here is when you maybe start to realize that he's not going to castle anytime soon, and he's playing very concretely. Knight f5, he goes queen f8. Point is very simple. After the most natural move, queen f7, I could go rook b1. If he takes, I don't think the a file is too useful for him. So he goes queen f8 instead, playing very ambitiously, and he's basically saying either you have to take on d6, which is a huge strategical concession. There's no way I want to take that bishop unprovoked, or you have to take on a5, which is a strategical concession. And if he does manage to castle, then he could be doing very well. So I took, didn't feel like I had a lot of choice, and I castled. Now it's all about time. Whether I can get something going before he completes his development. Because if he does, then he will have a positional advantage. But I have some things going for me. The pawn on b7 is unprotected at the moment. He lacks 2 moves to castle, which can be a problem. The rook on a5 is unprotected, which is always a tactical theme you're looking for. Always look out if your opponent has unprotected pieces, because loose pieces may drop off, as they say. And so there are some factors that I can try to exploit. So he went queen f7, and I went a4. And now we have more, again, tactical motives. It looks like he's ready to castle, but it turns out he's not. I go bishop h6, and he loses material. So he decided that he cannot castle yet. He went knight c5. But he still doesn't really threaten to castle, because knight e6 doesn't actually protect the pawn on g7, because I'll just take it and then I'll have the fork. So he's still lacking a bit of time. I go queen e1. Obviously he cannot consider rook a4, because I just take. Then queen a5. He's going to lose material. So the point of this is twofold. I attack the loose piece that you should always look for, and I am freeing up the knight on f3. And it can go in both directions, to be honest. It can go to h4, then maybe take it, go to f5, or go f4, or I can go to d2 and c4. It's both looking pretty attractive. He went b6. Now that I've got a bit of a target here, I want to go knight d2. I want to drive that knight, that rook away, and then I want to either play for f4 or I want to go a5. And it's clear that because of my continuing threats, he's not going to be able to castle very soon. So I still have some time to create threats. here, so he took on a4, which is quite logical, but now I got knight c4. And obviously if he takes, I have taking twice on d6, winning the queen on f7. And, well, king d7 doesn't work because I just take on a4, and then I take on d6 with either knight and queen b4, attacking too many of his pieces. So it's quite clear that he has to move the bishop, but where is not so obvious. Bishop e7 is possible, but it's very, very clumsy. And bishop f8 is possible, but then you start to think about, well, he was ready to castle 5-6 moves ago. And now he's not ready to castle, which clearly means that something has gone a bit off the rails for him. Well, he has won a pawn, but it's a long way from having any real fun. Sorry, the pawn is on b6. And, well, this game, again, the theme is attacking without sacrificing material. I have sacrificed the pawn, but I think most people would agree that I have such a big initiative here that I'm not too unhappy. So he went bishop f8. Probably bishop e7, although it looks very awkward, is what he should have done. I could go bishop e3. And now, once again, he has a very difficult choice. If he takes on a1, castles, once again bishop h6 is happening. So he cannot really do that. Castles immediately. Well, for once, bishop h6 is possible, but also knight takes e7. Queen takes e7. Bishop takes c5. Simply wins the piece. So he actually has to go king d7, which is really not a move you want to make. I could take on a4, and I could go f4 with a very nice initiative. I also have other tactical options here, like taking on b6, but I wasn't really sure that it was working. So I probably would just have taken then f4, and I felt like in a practical game I must be doing brilliantly, even though his position may be quite defensible. Anyway, he went bishop f8. But now it's very difficult for him. It's not clear what weaknesses he has, except that my pieces are so active. His bishop on h5 is a bit out of play, and his king is still in the center. So I'm really breaking through here by brute force. King d7, again, not much else to do. Rook a1, queen a1 doesn't help him at all. I go queen c3. And here I have a very simple threat, which is to take on b6, cb6, then bishop c5, and now that my queen is no longer on e1, rook a1 opens up the threat of rook a7 with an immediate win. And it's far from obvious how he's gonna defend against this threat. He can take on c4, which I feel like is the most obvious move. Then my rook is still very active on a1 if he takes on on e4, I can do this. g4, bishop g6. I could go c5, I could go rook fd1. He's still not developed. Bishop b6 is a huge threat. Bishop b6, by the way, didn't work so well on the previous move because of taking on f5 and then taking on c4. But just rook fd1 is massive for white. Which is, again, not surprising considering all my pieces are in play, and he's still playing without the rook on h8 and the bishop on f8. Bishop on f8 and rook on h8. So yeah, once again, I feel like this is not too difficult, but it's just such a good feeling. Attacking with not sacrificing anything. Once you get these positions, yeah, it's really the best feeling you can have in chess. Just attacking, no risk, all just natural moves flowing. He went knight takes e4, but now I have this little in-between move. Obviously I don't take on e4 because he will go queen c4, but I take, then I take on e4, opening up the 7th rank. If he takes on a1 again, rook a1, he's completely defenseless. And then queen c4, queen d2, king c7, g4, just opening up the square on d1, and bishop g6 he played rook fd1, and he just resigned because queen d8 is or queen d7 are unstoppable threats. So I guess the lesson from this game is you should castle pretty early on, and sometimes delaying development in order to attain some positional goals can be profitable, but very often it's very risky, and most of all it forces you to play so precisely later on that it's just not something a lot of people want to do. And you can see from this game that Wesley So is a very good player, so he feels like he can break these rules from time to time because he's so good that he knows when to break them and when not to break them, except sometimes even he gets it wrong. Like in this game, he couldn't really balance development and positional things. And I'm actually pretty proud of this game for playing very energetically. And you could say that I wasn't too brave in this game. I didn't have to sacrifice so much material. But then again, you don't always have to be. Sometimes it's enough to be able to willing to sacrifice one pawn, or to sacrifice some positional considerations for more time gains that you have to, these considerations that you have to make. And if you're brave enough to do it and you follow it up well, playing energetically, taking your chances of exploiting the tactical opportunities that you have, I think you can do very well. So this time, continuing the theme of attacking without sacrificing, we'll take a look at a game that I played in the good old days in 2014 against Wojtaszek in the Tromsø Olympiads. It was the first serious match that Norway had against Poland, and looking at it, I had a rating of 28.77, thinking, boy, I had a lot of rating back then, but it turns out I have almost as much now, so I guess that's a good sign. Anyway, Wojciech seems to be one of those players whom I do pretty well against. Others that come to mind are Elyanov, Gelfand. I think in general I enjoy playing these active positional players. I don't know how to describe all of them, but I don't know. Some people I just do well against, and not only do I win games, but they often seem to be fairly instructive as well. So anyway, I went e4, c5. Well, Wojciech always plays the knight off, so that was no huge surprise. And after knight c3, he went d6. And it was another 4 years before I would uncork d4 takes, knight c6, and queen d2 against him. The Greek freak variation, as it's sometimes called. But this time I had other plans. I remember I had a discussion with teammates and the coach of the Norwegian team before the game, and I asked them whether I should play something harmless or something bad, and they replied very clearly that I should play something bad. And so that's why I went for the close Sicilian. Not an opening that I played much, but I felt that Wojciech is somebody who does not deal so well with these slow kingside attacks, and that's why I decided to go for this. And obviously the variation being bad is a bit of an overstatement, but it would also be an overstatement to say that White has any chances to fight for an advantage here. So all of this is pretty standard stuff, and I went bishop e3. The other main move is f4 followed by knight f3, but bishop e3 kind of keeps it more flexible. And he went e5 and knight h3. In going for this, I was inspired by games of Spassky, in which he put the knight on h3. And I have to admit that I still don't completely understand the points. I guess there's something about keeping the f-file open. And obviously now that we've already played bishop e3, then f4 doesn't make that much sense to do immediately, as after ef4 we would have to waste the tempo. While now we could comfortably take with the knight. And I think part of the reason why I wanted to play it is simply that I felt that it looks cool. Anyway, he went knight e7, f4, and knight d4. I guess the reason why he did castle is that he was a little bit apprehensive about doing that before I'd castle myself, so maybe I could go f5, it takes queen h5, and maybe castle queenside. Having said that, I think it's not very impressive objectively speaking. Maybe better is just to castle myself here, but I can understand that that's what he was thinking, and besides, knight d4 is also far from a bad move. I castled, and now he decided to castle himself. At any of these moments I could go f5, but I felt that it wasn't too convincing, so I wanted to keep the tension myself. And this is a very typical close Sicilian plan. I want to keep the pieces on the board, knight to d1, then c3, driving his beautifully posted knight away. He went bishop d7. I felt like he's playing a bit strangely here, because the plan of bishop d7 and queen c8 doesn't make a whole lot of sense, since I get timed for knight d1 and knight f3, protecting the knight on h3. So maybe it made sense for him to do something else. What to suggest? It's not that simple. You could go for f5 at any point, but I understand that he probably doesn't want to do that. Part of the reason might be fe followed by bishop h6. And otherwise, a move that could be suggested is f6, trying to solidify the center a bit, preparing bishop e6. It should be noted that h6 is not on the cards really here, because it will be hanging after f5 or fe. Usually in these structures you want to play h6 to prepare bishop e6, but here I think f6 would be more reasonable. Anyway, bishop d7 is not that bad. Queen c8, not great, but I think maybe he he didn't really believe that I could just put my pieces all the way over here to on the edge of the board, but it's still part of the same idea of this slow king drift attack. And here he went for b5, which I really don't like at all. Sorry, knight c6, c3, and then he played b5, which I don't really like. I think it was more solid to play b6 than intending fe, de, keeping more central control. And here I remember I had several ideas, like to play knight g5 and then try to provoke, I don't know, f6 or something, and then go knight f3. Then later, after bishop e6, I could think about going f5 takes and then knight h4, trying to control some light squares. But I don't think it was too convincing. And also f5 here doesn't feel so great. If bishop h6, I still feel like f6 is a solid move for him. So here I would definitely have to show a lot more ingenuity to create some play. And it's clear it has to happen over on the king side, because this is where I got all my pieces, and I've already advanced the pawn to f4. Anyway, he went b5, which I feel is not great. fe, I take the chance of improving my control over the center. He does get a pretty nice outpost on e5 for his knight, but this one is not going to be there forever. Eventually, it's going to be driven away by d4. Naturally, at the moment, d4 is met by knight c4, winning this or exchanging this important bishop. So that's not going to happen. But I go bishop h6, and it's all part of the same plan. I'm trying to control the center so that I will have a free hand at attacking his king. And as you can see in the game, it all works quite beautifully. Knight to c6. Here it's already hard to give him any great advice, since my position is sort of playing itself. At the moment, once again, it doesn't look impressive. My bishop on g2 is not great, and for the moment he has good control over the center, but it's really hard for him to find a plan. And as you can see in the game, it all did flow quite smoothly for white. He went queen d8, decided that the queen was misplaced over there. Rook a to d1, overprotecting d4. In the case I'm gonna advance pretty soon. Rook c8, queen e2. I'm now intending d4 without allowing him either a tempo for knight c4 or knight g4, exchanging this knight. Now I'm threatening d4, and this knight will not only be driven away once, but it will be driven away once again with b3 once it reaches c4. And another point of this was to provoke what happens in the game, which is h5, d4, cd, cd, knight g4, h3. And it turns out that h5 is probably a bigger weakening of the queen side, of the king side than it looks. And here you can see that I've gained a lot of control over the center. There are suddenly attacking options like bringing the knight to d5, then to f6, maybe later the queen to f4, g5. And all of a sudden I have a great position in the center and an attack without without actually sacrificing material, which is, as I mentioned many times in this series, something that I love to do. Knight to e7, very logical, protecting against knight d5, and I went rook d3. Move that was, at least to me, fairly aesthetically pleasing. Preparing rook to f3, or also preparing to swing the rook all the way over to the h file after playing g4. He went b4, and now rook to f3, preventing the threat of bishop b5, obviously. Now after bishop b5, I don't really know whether knight h5 works. It looks like it should just win on the spot, to be honest. Takes, and then king h6, rook f6 is going to be made. King h8, queen h5 is also going to be a very quick mate. So it looks like it does indeed lose on the spot. But my point was that even if rook e1, something like this, g4 is coming, his king side is going to be blown open anyway, and I preserve all of the positional advantages of my position. But he correctly decided to go queen e8 instead. Here I had the possibility of playing simply d5, which I remember that this was my first intention. I guess I decided against it because I felt like winning a pawn on the queen side, which it looks like I do by force. For instance, a5, I can do queen b6, attacking both a5 and d6. Maybe I felt that it was a bit too cheap a way to give away my attacking chances here. And as far as I can remember, I really wanted to win the game in attack, which is why I went g4 instead, which I believe is also a very strong move. Now he took, and I took. And these openings of files usually favor the side with the more space, and in this case, with these pawns on d4 and e4, that's I'm clearly the one who has the space advantage. Queen h4 is now looking like a very strong threat, and he quite correctly went bishop b5. But now still I got just rook e1, and even though my rook has been driven away from the f-file, it's not the end of the world. Queen h4 is still an idea, and as you can see from the game, I've got others as well. Queen d8 happened, and g5. And now I'm threatening bishop h3, taking more control over the f6 square, and it's really quite difficult for him. As far as I can remember during the game, one of the lines that I looked at was knight c6, attacking g5. I just wanted to go rook g3, intending knight to d5. If queen b6, I just go rook d1, and I retain all of the advantages of my position. Instead, he went queen g5, queen b6. I went bishop h3, attacking the rook c d8. Now a little trick, finally bringing this formerly dormant bishop into the game by bishop to e6. Obviously cannot take it, because then I go knight e6, winning everything. Now threatening knight h5, I'm threatening bishop f7, so with collapse coming on f7 in either case. So we went bishop bishop e8, knight d5 was the conclusion, takes, and now bishop d5, and he simply resigned here. It's really a sad position for black now. There are basically no pieces that he can move, and I have a bunch of ways to possibly decide the game. I have rook h3 followed by queen h4. I have king g2 followed by rook h1. I have rook f1 coming, and yeah, it's all over positionally, and also his king is weak. So I think this game is a good example of when you win the fight for the center, that is often when you can build up an attack without allowing a lot of counterplay and without actually sacrificing stuff. Yes, at one point I did sacrifice a pawn with g3, but it was not that hard to see that in case of h3, h3, bishop g4, I would have had rook g3, and the attack rages on. Then there were tricks like if queen d7, then bishop h3 could be very, very strong. So I really didn't have to sacrifice much. It was all about taking control over the center, bringing the pieces to the king side, gaining more and more space and positional advantages. And as you can see from the final position, there is no one move threat, but my advantage is just so huge that he has no counterplay and no defense in the slightly longer run.